Welcome to See You on the Other Side, where the world of the mysterious collides with the world of entertainment. A discussion of art, music, movies, spirituality, the weird, and self-discovery. And now, your hosts, musicians and entertainers who have their own weakness for the weird, Mike and Wendy from the band Sunspot.
Hey, Mike. You ready for episode 21?
Episode 21 already. It's almost hard to believe, Wendy.
That's right. We've turned 21. Our podcast can legally consume alcohol in the United States now.
That sounds good. I think it's ready for a beer.
How have you been?
I've been excellent.
Since I saw you yesterday.
Yes. No. Well, I was just basking in the afterglow of a really fun show on Saturday night. And
that was a blast. Yes, indeed.
So it's good to get out to the good people of Racine and play some of our new songs for them, talk about the podcast. It's interesting now that we're doing the podcast that the people that know about it will come up and say like they've been listening and mention that they have some weird stories.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. And hopefully it'll help us collect some cool new topics to cover in the future.
Yeah, and it wasn't, Saturday wasn't much of a place to collect new stories because it was loud. It wouldn't be like, hey, let me record this. It was
right.
It was more like, let's have you on or write an email or something like that sometime. We'd love to feature your story on the show sometime. And
yeah, and who knows, if people keep doing that, maybe we'll have to start setting up like the confessional booth, like on those reality shows where the people go in and just talk to the camera.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm sure if we started doing that at shows, we'd get some interesting stories and some colorful language.
Yeah, that's true.
Well.
It's kind of not the ideal environment, but
I think that'd be great. It's nice to be. I mean, it's nice to be known as like we've always been a weird band, but now we get to be the weird band. As we talk about these things and
yes.
That becomes part of what we do. So I think that was a lot of fun. And no, I was just thinking about that today. So just a nice thing and a little side effect of working on the podcast in addition to playing music.
Yeah. And, hopefully we'll get to meet more new people. That's always fun and exciting. And something cool happened last week that might help us with that.
What's that?
Our podcast made it into the new and noteworthy category on iTunes.
It did? I hardly even noticed.
It was in the society and culture category. So perhaps some new people will hopefully find us because of that. And if you are a new listener, well, hello and welcome.
Yeah, well, welcome to the other side.
We're happy to have you here. And we're also really happy to have anybody who's subscribed at any point along the way. We've been doing this since Halloween of 2014. So still somewhat new, but just having fun with it.
And thank you to everybody that's been subscribing and leaving reviews on iTunes, because that certainly helps us get higher in the rankings. And it looks great for us, and we absolutely really appreciate it. In fact, I do believe we have a new 5-star review that we're going to have a little song for today. Is that right?
We sure do, yeah.
Okay. Well, let's check out this awesome 5-star review from Dante De La Roca.
I'll admit to being a long-time Sunspot fan, so I am a bit biased. I really enjoy listening to Mike and Wendy break down the paranormal sci-fi alternative topic of the day.
Well, that was fun. And if you like our podcast enough to want to leave a 5-star review, please do, because you may just get a song. Well, you will get a song at some point made out of your review. So thank you, Dante de la Roca.
And anybody who wants to leave a 5-star review gets a song that can be you, and you can go easily do that if you don't want to have to do the search through iTunes and everything. You can just go to othersidepodcast.com/iTunes, and it'll lead you right there.
That's right. And one more quick announcement before we get into the exciting topic of the day. You can always find the show notes for whatever episode by going to othersidepodcast.com/ and the episode number. Today's episode is 21, so go to othersidepodcast.com/21. You guys can figure that out, I know.
Right. We're a very intelligent listener base is what I believe we have.
Yes, but we'll have the links and everything for items that we talk about here today. So if you're curious to find out more, you can go there and follow through and explore the topic on your own.
And the show notes are great too, I think, because it's a good way for further reading. It's a bibliography, a lot of the sources of what we talk about, but it also is a great way for you to explore more of these topics on your own. So if you find something that you really think is interesting, like last week's podcast interview with Matthew Swain, like it was a link to his book right away that you could pick up his book and grab it for yourself. And today there'll be links where you can see more and learn more about Stonehenge.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's, Stonehenge is always fun because, even when you're a little kid, you think of this mystical, wonderful place on the other side of the planet, like just in this field, Salisbury Plain.
Yeah, and nobody knows how it was created or when, right? They have an idea of when.
But it's a great lost kind of thing. Imagine, we don't have too many of these things. We have some Native American stuff. We have a lot of Native American stuff here in the U.S. In Wisconsin, particularly, we don't have anything in particular. We have some Indian burial mounds that are really cool. But you don't have anything like a huge stone structure to be like, how did this get here? What happened?
Right.
And that's what makes it cool, the fact that it's a mystery and everybody has a million guesses as to what it could be. And there's people that have dedicated their entire lives to the study of Stonehenge.
Wow.
And what it could have meant to Britain. And I just think it's really neat. And well, Wendy, you've been to Stonehenge, right? So,
yeah.
What were some of your impressions of seeing these megaliths in person?
Well, it was really cool. Now I was quite young, so I was in 4th grade when my family was on a European vacation.
Okay, right.
And I was very excited about it because as someone who's always been really into the King Arthur stories and legends, I had read a lot about it and just thought it was generally the cool thing. But when we went to visit it, we had to walk on this trail that was kind of not very close to it.
Okay.
So, I mean, it was neat and it was cool to see it in person with my own eyes, but it was like, because I was thinking we'd get to go walk around inside it and stuff.
That you get to lay down on a slab right in the middle.
Yeah, I wanted to walk through one of the little doors and stuff, but that was totally out of the question. So it was neat and it's impressive, a very impressive sight to see. But I guess that's all the impression I really have.
Yeah,
that I still remember.
I've heard the same things from people I know that have gone. They've said well, you're kind of it's fenced in and you're pretty far away from it, so you kind of see it, but you don't get that feeling of the majesty of being inside this.
Because they have to protect it, because otherwise, humans are jerks and they'll probably destroy it. So.
Right, they do something crazy with it. Like people would have parties at Stonehenge. You'd be like, well, who wants to have a party at Stonehenge? I do. I want a party at Stonehenge. When I did my grand tour of the UK, that was the one thing that I skipped, was going to Stonehenge.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to have something, a reason to come back, in addition just to, that I'm in love with British culture. It was a reason to return and an excuse to be like, well, I got to see Stonehenge this time, so we got to go back.
That's always good to have one more reason to go back, right?
Yeah, I think so. You always leave them wanting more. And so that Stonehenge was my more. And I look forward to that sometime. But just to go through a little history of the site, the Stonehenge is from the Neolithic period. And Neolithic, means New Stone Age. So it's that period between about like 10,000 BC and 5 to 2000 BC. So people at the time, in the Stone Age, they call it the Stone Age because they were using tools made of stone. This is before they started smelting metal. It's before we had the kind of tools that we would recognize as not just the modern age. Our tools are way out there, but even the tools of an axe with a
they're working just with items they find in nature, basically. They're not like forming steel.
Right. They're putting stuff together what they find, and those are the kind of tools that created just getting into farming, just getting into those types of things. They're domesticating animals, dogs, sheep, ghosts, all these things for the first time, and basically the beginning of what we would, existence as we know it. And so that's the kind of fun is that here is not just a relic, but a structure, a building, a place that people considered important from the beginnings of human civilization. And that mystery of it is probably what has kept Stonehenge in such pop culture for the past, hundreds of years. It's been in everything. We'll talk about the movies and the books and everything like that. But let's just talk a little bit about the history of Stonehenge and, how it was originally built and everything like that. It's the megalithic structures. So lithic, stone, we're going back to some of our Greek here. Mega, huge. So that's what these are. It's a big circle, a megalith of these gigantic stones, and they come all the way from Wales. Now, if you're familiar at all with the geography of Britain, southern England is on one side of the island, and Wales is, real far to the west on the island. So the stones that they used came from a couple of 100 miles away. And that's part of the big mystery because...
Yeah, how do you move them?
How do you move these gigantic stones hundreds of miles? It's not like you have a truck. They just throw them in the truck. And then how do you lift them up? And that's the real thing when they're making something that's 2,500
like
years
the pyramids.
ago. It's the same kind. It's exactly like the pyramids. And so it's a very impressive ancient structure, and that's kind of what people were getting into, and they're trying to figure out exactly what it was used for.
How and why.
And so, one of the most recent theories is that it started as a burial ground for not an aristocracy, but important families around 3000 BC, because they found lots of cremated human remains around the site.
Oh, okay.
But they found them, and they were from around 500 years before the Stonehenge we know today was even erected.
Huh.
And so one of the recent theories is that it's a graveyard. And they found several structures on the inside. They found relics of a wooden Stonehenge inside the stone
that's cool.
Stonehenge.
I never heard that.
So, yeah. And part of it is that there used to be several structures amongst it, and people think that it was a big site, not just the rocks we see today. You think of a bunch of druids hanging out, like having a human sacrifice, like on a slab in the middle of Stonehenge or something like that. But it seems like it was just more of a center for. It could have been religious. It could have been a place where people came and they said goodbye to their ancestors and things like that. But
a place of prayer, gathering.
Yeah.
Who knows? Remembering.
And there's another theory in this latest study that's come out that this guy named Parker Pearson, and he says that during this time, it was when the tribes of ancient Britain were starting to trade with each other, starting to get together, starting to unify a little more than they had in the past. So instead of small tribes and villages and more families being isolated and hermetic, they started to get to know each other. And his theory is that Stonehenge was a building project that united people from all over the island.
Interesting.
So that they'd created this place like in a central location. They brought these stones over from Wales, and it was kind of like a camp. And people would get together and celebrate the fact that Britain was unifying for the first time. I think that's kind of a cool thing. There's also the idea that it was used for astronomical kind of stuff, because there's a certain, they call them avenues, like these little roads or pathways that lead to like nearby rivers. And one of the pathways from the stones that leads out lines up directly with the sunrise at the summer solstice and the sunset at the winter solstice.
Okay, that's cool. So there was some thought put into, they didn't just randomly pick a spot and draw a circle and go, hey, put them here, guys, come on over.
Yeah.
It's actually calculated.
Exactly. So that's why they thought it was like an astronomical observatory, because it did match up with these, with the different solstices. Or solstices.
Solstice.
I guess, I don't know. Yeah, it's the solstice. But that's one of the thoughts around it. But also, people think of it as a gathering place during the solstices. So if you think of it like, how in Sturgis they have bikers come every year?
Right. Like a pilgrimage.
Yeah, it's a place, they think it might have been a place where everybody would get together on the solstice to celebrate.
That's cool.
So unifying Britain, and everybody comes down to Stonehenge to camp out, party,
Yeah.
like the Burning Man, like a Neolithic Burning Man.
Or kind of like Mount Rushmore on the 4th of July or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Where people go a certain time of year to have a celebration, a festival. And of course, during the autumnal equinox and everything, they'd be celebrating the harvest. And since they're just getting into farming, it's becoming part of human culture. So there's some cool ideas about what Stonehenge could have been. But like anything, it's just a guess. It's
Right.
Scientists doing their best to guess about what it could have been.
Yeah, it's amazing that they haven't dug up some documentation or who knows.
Like a book or something. Well, the thing is,
A stone tablet, anything, like.
yeah. Well, I mean, one of the reasons that we have so much of the history of Egypt and we understand it in something similar like the pyramids is because they had that written language. And because they had, they kept records of their religion and their pharaohs and everything, and they wrote everything down. But they didn't do that in ancient Britain. And when people envision the Druids and everything, well, Druidic culture didn't even really develop until a few centuries before the Roman occupation of British Isles. So it's not real. It's probably not really like the Druids didn't just use it. It wasn't built as a Druid
They
temple.
found it and then they're like, whoa, this is sweet. Let's go here.
Yeah, let's go. Let's have a big rave at
Party.
Stonehenge.
So they might
And,
not have known its origin either. They just discovered it and
Right. I doubt they they could have had some legends and stuff, but I doubt. If we think about it today, from the time Stonehenge was built to when, 500 BC is the time of us till the 2nd century. So think about how much we know of the 2nd century, and we have written language, and they don't.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it was just as a big mystery to them. It was a big mystery when the Romans showed up as it is to us today. And so that's one of the fun, like Stonehenge is just a mystery. And that's why it has so many books and weird things associated with it. It's always had some kind of folklore associated with it. And especially its connection to Arthuriana and King Arthur.
Indeed.
So, maybe we should talk a little bit about the books that have used, Stonehenge as a
Sure.
place or a plot point.
Yeah,
in
that's
there.
kind of fun.
And I know, Wendy, one of your favorite books talked about it a little bit, right?
Oh yeah, there've been many books that I enjoyed. Where should we start?
Well, I think we should start with the King Arthur stuff and talk about the myths of Avalon.
I mean, definitely. The one that I can remember very clearly was Myths of Avalon. I mean, that location played a central role in the story. So they would have... Now, it's been a long time since I actually read that. So...
Sure.
But I remember enough of it that, it was kind of like a secret gateway, and they'd go down there, and different things in the story would happen there. So
Sure. Well, I mean, one of the things is that there's a folktale about Merlin being the creator of Stonehenge.
Oh, Merlin.
And in just case you don't know who Merlin is, he was the wizard who helped King Arthur.
The Gandalf of King Arthur legend.
Yes, he is. And the folktale, and there's a great picture. It's like a tapestry from 1155, and it shows Merlin with a giant, and the Merlin's having the giant move the big rocks on Stonehenge and putting puts the big rock on top of it. Yeah, and they drew this tapestry about a giant helping Merlin build
cool.
Stonehenge.
Imaginative, I like it.
Yeah, and one of the folk tales is that it's a giant circle. The giant's circle is what they call it, and that the giants were there and they were frozen, and they became the rocks of what became Stonehenge. In the folktale, though, Merlin had the giants carry the stones all the way from Ireland, which, I mean, I guess would be even tougher than carrying it from Wales, because you have to carry it across the sea, and I don't know that giants can swim that well, especially with tons and tons of rock, even if they're pretty badass.
Well, maybe they're so tall that they can walk across and still be above water.
Right, they could be that. I guess if you're going with the Merlin theory,
let's go all out.
That's about as good as any. One of the most famous books that talk about it is Thomas Hardy's Tess of D'Urberville.
And I'm a huge Thomas Hardy fan.
Well, he makes reference to the echoes and the resonances within Stonehenge in the novel. And you picked a little section from the novel. Do you want to read that for us, Wendy?
Yeah. So the quote is, "The wind playing upon the edifice produced a booming tune, like the note of some gigantic one-stringed harp. No other sound came from it. At an indefinite height overhead, something made the black sky blacker, which had the semblance of a vast architrave uniting the pillars horizontally. They entered carefully beneath and between. The surfaces echoed their soft rustle, but they seemed to be still out of doors." And they refer to it as a temple of the winds, because the wind, as it blew through the stones, would make this kind of eerie sound.
Okay. And then you also picked, speaking of that, the Temple of the Winds.
Yes. Yeah, that's funny. The Name of the Wind, which I recently read, the Patrick Rothfuss.
Which is a fine Wisconsin author, if I've ever read one.
And I'm in the sequel right now, and so I'm still very deep in the story.
Yes, and it's great.
It is. So yeah, they refer to what they call waystones in that story, and they describe it exactly as, two pillars with a long stone laying across the top of them, and they have great significance in the story. They play a big role in many of the scenes within there, so that's another fun reference.
Yeah, and the idea of Stonehenge as almost a musical instrument, a place creating a mystical sound. That's interesting because some sound experts have gone to Stonehenge, and one of the suggested uses they had for it was an amphitheater, because they say if you play music or sing there, then it has the very acoustics of an amphitheater. So that circle of stones creates a kind of a hall of sound.
That's cool. I would love to do a concert in there or attend one.
Yeah, I think playing Stonehenge should be one of our goals. We'll see if we can get the British government to let us set up a couple of amps in there and see what happens.
We can call the concert Rock the Henge.
Yeah, right. Right. It's
Rock Henge.
It's literally a rock concert.
Oh.
Hey-o.
Da-da-da-da-da.
Thank you. We'll be here all week.
Yeah.
But yeah, Stonehenge, there's a couple of famous references in books.
So many of them, yeah.
And Yeah, backed up by the science. But Tess D'Uberville's and getting into talk about a little bit of the movies that have used Stonehenge.
Ooh, yes, there are many of those, aren't there?
A really good one is from the late 70s. There's a version of Tess D'Uberville's done by Roman Polanski and starring Natasha Kinski. And so in that movie, they actually built a life-size replica of Stonehenge in France.
That's a project. I wonder what they made this out of. Styrofoam?
I mean, probably. And, right, something quick and something fast and something that people could carry, like regular set guys.
Like paper mache.
But plenty of movies have used that, and so they've built models of Stonehenge and everything.
And were they to scale, Mike?
That one I can't tell. But speaking of scale...
Oh, good. You got my transition.
That gets probably the one of the most famous...
Nearest and dearest to my heart, personally.
Stonehenge is from This Is Spinal Tap. And I rewatched that scene where they're actually in... it's supposed to take place in Austin, where he's talking to the lady that designed it. And... Now, if you guys haven't seen This Is Spinal Tap...
Spoiler alert.
Number one, it's a spoiler alert. Number two, you should be renting that. I don't know if any of you rents movies anymore, but renting it or buying it off iTunes, whatever. As soon as
Netflix.
As soon as you're done with this podcast, you should watch This Is Spinal Tap, because you have any interest
it's so
in
great.
the stupidity of musicians. Spinal Tap captures every little piece of it.
And it just holds true. Like, it's not aged or anything like that. It still completely applies.
Mm-mm.
So that's great.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny because the story that inspired the Stonehenge moment in Spinal Tap is actually based on something real that happened to Black Sabbath in 1983. So Black Sabbath in 1983, Ozzy Osbourne's been out of the band for a while. Ronnie James Dio came in and he's out of the band now. So they get Ian Gillan, who is the singer from Deep Purple, Smoke on the Water, and Highway Star, My Woman from Tokyo, songs like that. And they're going to call it something different, but the manager, who was Sharon Osbourne's father, demanded that they keep the name Deep Purple because he thought it would sell more records. And he was right, because the album they put out with Ian Gillan, which was called Born Again, was the highest charting Black Sabbath album they had since 1973. And it was funny. I mean, the cover of the album is it's pretty disgusting. It's a newborn baby painted red with like yellow fingernails and two yellow horns sticking out of his head. And it's pretty gross. So on the tour for that record, they're getting together in Birmingham and getting the stage all together. And somebody asked if anyone has ideas for a stage set. And then the bass player, Geezer Butler, suggests Stonehenge. And the engineer asked him, well, how do you see it? And he just goes, life-size, of course. And they built a life-size Stonehenge. But it was too big for the place they were rehearsing in Birmingham. So they couldn't even rehearse with it until they got to Canada a week before their opening show in Montreal. And Ian Gillan talks about it in an interview. And he says, on the last day of the rehearsal, we're wondering what this dwarf is doing hanging around backstage. When we do the dress rehearsal, the dwarf emerges in a red leotard, long yellow fingernails, and little yellow horns. He's going to be the baby from the album cover. Then we hear this horrendous screaming sound. They've recorded a baby scream and flanged it. And suddenly we see this dwarf crawling across the top of Stonehenge. Then he stands up as the baby scream fades away and falls backwards off this 30-foot fiberglass replica of Stonehenge onto a big pile of mattresses. Then, dong, dong, bells start tolling and all the roadies come across the front of the stage in monk's cowls, at which point War Pigs starts up. By now, we can see the kids are either in stitches or wincing in horror. And the whole debacle of the thing is that it took $40,000 a day to put this massive production on. And it was completely ridiculous and completely stupid. So that's the direct, real-life inspiration for that scene in Spinal Tap.
And the Spinal Tap reference is particularly relevant because there's a venue in Milwaukee that we've played at that has... Well, it's called Shank Hall in reference to This Is Spinal Tap, and they have the little tiny Stonehenge as like a backdrop on the stage, so it's great.
Oh my! I completely forgot about that. I completely forgot about that. So right. So even in Milwaukee, they've got that little piece of Stonehenge that right there. So its integration with the music world is very near and dear to us.
Yes.
Stonehenge also is an important part of King Lear.
Oh.
So, there's a scene in King Lear that takes place in Stonehenge because the actual story of King Lear, even though a lot of they're portrayed in Victorian clothing a lot of the time, it's drawn from the myth of Lear of Britain, who was a pre-Roman Celtic ruler. And Laurence Olivier in 1987 made a production for the BBC that took the story back to that pre-Roman age. And so they really brought Stonehenge into it in the pre-Roman days, and that's a really cool look for the Laurence Olivier version of King Lear if you want to see a good replication of Stonehenge. And so that's something that I thought was great. I spent a whole semester on King Lear in college.
That's a lot of time on King Lear.
That is a good deal of time on King Lear. They also have a little bit of it in Shanghai Nights. Do you ever see that one?
I have not seen that one, actually.
Okay. That's Shanghai Nights. You get the buddies of Jackie Chan and Owen Wilson.
Okay.
And
sounds fun already.
Yeah, it takes place in Victorian England, and there's a little steampunk twist to it. Stonehenge is a little bit into it. They crash into it, and somebody says, "Who the hell would put a pile of stones in the middle of a field?" And Shanghai Nights has a little bit of it. And then everybody has probably seen National Lampoon's European Vacation.
Yay.
Right, that's gloriously stupid.
Yes.
The first one is great. They're all pretty funny. But
and we always come back to like the Chevy Chase, or I guess the National Lampoon's movies.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about Randy Quaid before, and anyway, it just seems to be a recurring theme on our show.
Right.
But how is Stonehenge? Oh, yes, that scene was so funny. Okay, I don't want to spoiler this one either, but Stonehenge plays a very key role in that movie.
So you can find that scene on YouTube too, but the Griswold family has a visit to Stonehenge that goes hilariously poorly in National Lampoon's European Vacation.
And it's great because that movie came out shortly before my family did our European vacation.
Oh, was yours just like it?
Exactly.
A lot of roundabouts, huh?
Yeah, it's true. But anyway.
No, so those are just... here's a couple just quick ones. There's a movie called Night of the Demon, out in 1957. And that one, they prevent a sacrifice going on at Stonehenge.
Ooh.
And 1957, so it's family safe probably, because the scariest stuff in 1957 is like the tamest stuff, like you can see it on the Disney Channel today.
True.
And a couple of years ago, they had a cheesy B movie called Stonehenge Apocalypse.
Ooh.
And in that one, the mysterious ancient monuments of the world come to life. And they just used Stonehenge probably as a name because it's one of the ancient monuments of the world. So it's kind of ridiculous.
That's cute.
Yeah, so those are just some of the film portrayals of Stonehenge. And it really, that has been, part of our culture. So to think about this Neolithic monument on the other side of the world is something that everybody knows. Mm-hmm. And just because it's used in so many things. And in TV, my favorite show used Stonehenge twice.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's
what show is that, Mike?
That's Doctor Who, which is
of course
the best. And I've made a couple of Doctor Who pilgrimages in my life. But so back in the 70s, they had a season of Doctor Who called The Key to Time, where the Doctor and his companion Romana searched out through the universe for 6 segments of this key that would have power over time and space. And one of the components of the key was a rock of Stonehenge. So the episode's
cool.
The episode's called The Stones of Blood, and everything in Doctor Who is of blood, of death, of nightmares, of something.
Huh.
So it's not just that, but some of them, the rocks at Stonehenge actually come to life and kill people. So with 1970s special effects too. 1970s
Great. That sounds fabulous.
1970s British TV special effects. So it looks like it was made in a basement.
Of course.
But, to my young mind, it was like, oh my God, Stonehenge, the rocks are alive and they're cosmic.
Yeah, it's like the rocks that talk in Labyrinth.
Yeah, it's much like that, except Labyrinth, they looked cool.
They look way better.
And in Doctor Who, it looked like the styrofoam rock was walking towards somebody and murders you. And then Doctor Who used it again for the season finale of the 5th season, or the 5th series. The Pandorica opens.
Okay.
And so the Pandorica was this mystical box a prison that could hold, it was specifically made to hold anyone, and nobody could escape from the Pandorica. And the Pandorica was located beneath Stonehenge.
Aha.
So
Seems like a good spot for it.
Yep, and so the Doctor has like a last stand on top. He stands on one of the rocks in Stonehenge, and there's all these alien ships above him.
Sweet.
And he calls out to the alien ships to come and get him, and waits for them to come down and start attacking Stonehenge. And it's just it's a really cool scene. So
that sounds cool.
As far as TV stuff, those are my favorite TV references to Stonehenge.
Cool. I'm sure there are many, many, many more.
Yeah,
if you can think of any, let us know.
Because we can only talk about so many.
It's fun to think about them and just kind of recount how many times it's appeared that I've seen, at least.
Right. And another thing that I love about anything huge and mysterious made in ancient times, people are going to have conspiracy theories about.
Right. Oh, definitely.
And I mean, one of the first theories is that it wasn't giants that built Stonehenge. It was aliens. That just like they built the pyramids, because there's no way that our small-minded ancestors, our tiny-brained ancestors, could have dragged these gigantic stones from Wales 200 miles to the Salisbury Plain.
Sure. And aliens would have the tools to do that.
Sure. Aliens could just use a tractor beam. They just show up, grab with their tractor beam, pop it on over to Salisbury Plain, drop it off, and go get the next one. So it's a little bit of Chariots of the Gods right there.
Pretty cool.
And that they talk about Stonehenge was one of the, number one, because it lines up with these solstices.
Sure.
Is that it's an astronomical observatory so that the ancient Britons could then keep track of the aliens flying around that had visited them and created Stonehenge for them.
That's nice. I like that story.
Yeah. And
or theory or whatever.
And looking around on the internet, I mean, I found some things with people talking about, Stonehenge is a place where the Anunnaki, who we remember from
That's right.
the lizards that rule the world.
What was that episode?
That was,
I think it was episode 3.
Yeah, that was our Election Day special. That the Anunnaki built Stonehenge as one of the places where the Illuminati could gather. So they have conspiracy theories about that too. I don't really know how much credence I put on that, because the article I read about it, that person said it came to them during a Kundalini meditation, and this great goddess had come to them in the meditation and had told them that Stonehenge was a place for the Anunnaki.
Okay.
So, I do meditation and stuff like that, but I've never had a goddess show up and tell me anything that cool. So maybe I just haven't meditated hard enough.
Right. Or maybe it's just not time yet.
Right. It's not my time
for you to know
to get that. But Stonehenge, I mean, the great mystery. Was it built by aliens? Oh, maybe. But
who built it and why?
I'd like to think that it's the triumph of human ingenuity 5,000 years ago, that they could put something together. And I really love the idea of Stonehenge being the place where ancient Britons came to party on the winter solstice and the summer solstice. And so they camped out, they feasted, they played songs. I don't even know what kind of instruments they'd have back then, probably banging on stones. Who knows?
Yeah.
But
it's pretty cool. It's kind of like the World's Fair sites that still exist. Like pieces of them exist around. I mean, obviously those are much more modern, but
right.
This is kind of like the ancient version of that, and it's just robust enough to withstand so many years.
Yeah, and I think it's fun to imagine Stonehenge as a place where everybody just used to get together and celebrate and maybe, say goodbye to their ancestors and things like that.
So not rocks that kill people, come to life and kill people.
But I also love the idea that there might be a couple of those rocks that are aliens that might come to life and kill you during that party.
Super.
So if you think we missed one of your favorite references to Stonehenge, because it's in 1,000 different books, movies, TV, songs, whatever.
Or if you have any theories of your own as to what it is or who built it or why.
Or if you visited it and had a different experience than Wendy's disappointing one.
Yes.
Then what you should do is send us an email to show@othersidepodcast.com, or you can reply underneath the show notes on the blog, and we'll definitely attend to that in a future episode.
That's right.
But until then, I think I want to hear a song with some Stonehenge influence.
Me too. Let's go.
Let's kick it out.
Sacrifice yourself upon the stone. Something so unknown in your bones, but you'll never find a way alone. To the source, we go back to the source. And the mother of time is calling us home. Leave our life behind and come to the stones. Part of the land and part of the sky. We are alive. It's only their grave. Humans fresh out of the cave. Sacrifice ourselves upon the stone. A genetic memory of something so we know it in our bones. Back to the source, we go back to the source. And the mother of time is calling us home. Leave our life behind and come to the stones. Part of the land and part of the sky. We are alive. I know there's a way back, somewhere in Salisbury Plain. It's just a kind of magic, and we'll get there someday. I know there's a way back, somewhere in Salisbury Plain. It's just a kind of magic, and we'll get there someday. Back to the and the mother of time is calling us home. Leave our life behind and come to the stones. Part of the land and part of the sky. We are alive.
thank you for listening to today's episode. You can find us online at othersidepodcast.com. Until next time, see you on the other side.